Hi friends, it's Miracle and Happy New Year! We are on the last day of 2021 and it is the time to wrap up the reading year and talk about the books that I love the most during the past year. I have 9 books here, including fictions and non-fictions. I know it's not an even number, but honestly, I cannot find another book that I love as much as these 9, so here we are. And needless to say that these books are not all published in 2021, they're only the books that I personally read in 2021, and I will talk about them in the order that I read them during the year. So without further ado, let's dive right in. The first book I read that made into my favorite this year is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a book that Chanel Miller reclaimed her identity as a survivor of the sexual assault case happened in Stanford a while ago. Before that, she was known as Emily Doe, who published a victim impact statement on BuzzFeed, and the rapist of her case, Brooke Turner, was sentenced to prison for only 6 months and only served 3. But in the meantime, Chanel Miller, as the survivor, needs to go through the traumatized memory again and again in the aftermath, and privately, she suffered from so much victim blaming, and more importantly, like the book pointed out, the justice system of the US of rape is tend to protect the perpetrators, especially when the victim make themselves vulnerable, like Chanel Miller. In this book, Chanel Miller led the readers through each steps of the incident, from before it happens, how her life looked like before, to after, for example, how the evidence was collected, how she fought in the court, and how she survived after. So this is a deeply personal account, but also she writes for all the survivors there are and helping people heal. And from this book, you can tell that Chanel Miller is a great writer no matter of the topics. Her writing is coherent, sensible, and very smooth to read. So this is a book that stayed with me from the beginning of the year because I read it in January, so stayed with me the whole year, and I'm really glad that I read it. The next book made into this list is A Girl is a Body of Water by Jennifer Nansabuka Makumbi. This is also called The First Woman in the UK edition. This is a historical coming-of-age novel set in the 1970s Uganda during the Idi Amin's regime, where a lot of people are living in terror. Our protagonist Karabo living with her grandparents in Uganda in a small village, and she did not know where and who her mom is. So looking for her mom became one of her main drives in life, and as readers we follow the process of looking for her mom, and we soon realize this is a wonderful journey where Karabo became a strong young woman with concrete ideas to the world and herself. This book is doing a great job as a historical fiction, immersed us in a culturally rich Uganda village from the beginning, and later on provide us the comparison between village life and city life at the time. It also shows us the historical conflict Uganda had. For example, what's the life look like during a totalitarian regime, the slavery, and also colorism. Feminism is also awakening at the time, and different social groups has different reaction to it. I loved reading about the dynamic between each element, culture, generation, and characters. And also this book showed us how the Uganda traditional culture plays a role in each one of the elements, which I really liked. Overall, this is an amazing book with wonderful character development. I read it for the BookTube prize, and I'm still sad today that it didn't pass the second round. To me, this is the best fiction in the fictions that I read. Foreign, I have here Our Bodies, Their Battlefield, War Through the Lives of Women by Christina Lamb. And from the annotation, you can tell that how much I loved this book. Christina Lamb is a longtime war correspondent, and during the year of her work, she noticed that as men are always acting as the fighter in the war, women are rarely interviewed and rarely spoke out about their experiences during the war, and moreover, women's body are used as a weapon against other faction of men. Women are raped, but at the same time, rape is very hard to convict as one of the crimes in the war, as if rape doesn't matter when it comes to the reckoning of the war. I had many takeaways from this book, and it is very eye-opening because I have never thought about that during wartime, women's body can be used as a weapon against men from other faction, that raping women is not actually an act out of sexual reasons. It is a showing of power. It is like something like we raped your women, we're stronger kind of thing. And after I started to look and think this way, a lot of things actually fall into places, and it's just simply something that I cannot unseen afterwards. And also this book showed me a lot of war and conflict that I didn't know before, and a lot of the event happened during wartime gave me a feeling of there's no new things under the sun. I love how detailed the interview was did in this book to different group of people in different wars, and I also love how honest everything was presented in this book. I gotta say that this is one of the most physically disturbing book I have read for a long time. I physically wanted to vomit when I was reading it, and it is very hard for me to pick it up when I was reading it. But at the same time, it is also very hard for me to put it down. This is not one of the most well-written books in this pile, but I just appreciate the existence of this book. The next book is also a heavy-hearted one. I have a couple of these coming up. I think I might just rename this video to What a Heartbroken Reading Year. But the book is Night by Elie Wiesel, translated by Mariel Wiesel. This is Elie Wiesel's memoir, and the first book of his Night trilogy is talking about when he was a kid, how him and his family was caught and put into the Auschwitz concentration camp during the Second World War, and how he witnessed the death of his family and observed how people can change during desperate situations. This book is an honest record and presentation of a chapter of human history that is most evil and brutal, and in my opinion, this is a must-read for almost everybody. Writing-wise, the book is very elegant written with a lot of brilliant quote that carved into my mind after I read it. And humanity-wise, this is just so important to read and remember, because as the writer said, to forget is not only dangerous but offensive. To forget the dead is akin to killing them the second time. And then I read and fell in love with the longest book I have read in the past couple years, and it is Red Comet, The Short Life and Blazing Art of Sylvia Plath by Heather Clark. This book makes me appreciate Book2 Prize even more, because I don't think I'll pick this up if it wasn't assigned to me, but every page was worth it. This is the biography of Sylvia Plath. I did not really know a lot about Sylvia Plath before, but it just feel amazing because Sylvia likes to write, so she kept a diary all the time. She started to write poems when she was very little. So when scholars like Heather Clark research about her, they're able to reference so many things from her works, from her diaries, and also critique the poems at different stages of her life throughout the whole biography, and makes me feel like I know Sylvia Plath from a long time ago, although that I never really read anything about her before this book. So I feel it's such a wonderful journey reading this book. I know that this is not a thing for everybody, so this is totally a personal preference, but I really love this book. Sylvia Plath herself is a very interesting woman. She's intelligent, passionate, and hardworking, and disciplined. Emphasis on the discipline. While I was reading this book, I feel great sorrow throughout the whole book, because I just can feel that she's so self-aware and self-restrained. My heart was ever so heavy when I was reading this book, especially the stories from earlier stages of her life. This book details the every people that influenced her, and also the limit she had from the time she lived in. And the thing that I appreciate the most from this book, and also a thing that a lot of people appreciate, is this book didn't conclude depression and her mental health as one of the big factors that defined her life. This book was able to see through the depression she was struggling for almost like her entire life, and see her as an artist, a great artist and an extraordinary poet. So overall, as I said, I enjoyed every page of this book, and I'm really glad that I made through it. Continue with the kind of depression theme. I loved a novel called My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This book is about a woman called Vanessa who has been involved in this very long-term relationship with her teachers since she's 15. And now she's an adult, and The teacher was accused of sexual assault by some former students from the same school, and they reached out to Vanessa expecting her to speak up. And this event transformed the thought that Vanessa has about their relationship and put her in a paradoxical situation. The book brilliantly jumped from two timelines. The first one was when Vanessa was 15 and in school when she was slowly stepping into an abused relationship, both physically and mentally. I say abused here is from a reader and adult point of view, but Vanessa didn't know at the time. She couldn't distinguish between feelings and traps. And the second timeline is nowadays when Vanessa is an adult and she's struggling to admit the abuses that happened to her, because how could she? To admit the abuses happened to her and her relationship is to deny her life entirely, is to deny all the things she had to tell herself over these years. I loved this book so much. I think it captures the nature of a manipulative and abused man so well, and also it shows us how powerless teenage girls are and how powerless a person carries trauma from a very young age is. At the same time, the book shows us the harm of presenting and romancing toxic relationships in our culture. I loved a book written in Chinese called 房思琪的初恋乐园 by Lin Yihan. The English translation of the book is called 房思琪's First Love Paradise. I don't know if the book got translated in English yet, but as far as I know, it only has a Korean translation. The topic of that book is very similar to my Dark Vanessa, but the differences being that Fang Siqi's First Love Paradise is inspired by the author's true life story, and she was abused when she was a teenager and carried the trauma throughout her life. And because I read and loved that, I can see that my Dark Vanessa has a very accurate psychological portrait of the characters. And then I have read Beautiful Country by Qian Zhuli Wang, a book that I raved about for the past couple months. This is Qian's memoir about her first few years living in the US as an undocumented kid. She came to the US with her parents at the age of 7 because her parents told her that America is a beautiful country and they're hoping to establish a hopeful life here, but soon they realized that they need to overcome so many difficulties in order to have a life in a country where they don't even speak the language yet. I have a full review of this book. I'll link down below. This book was written from a kid's perspective, unfolding all the events that made her insecure and feel erased in America. And Qian also wrote about how she had to see that her parents, who was well respected and held stable jobs in China, had to switch to heavy labors with no benefits whatsoever in the US, and how she had to digest all these changes and all these events at a young age and eventually protect her own family in her own way. This is a very genuine and powerful memoir, showed us how life looks like living as an undocumented immigrant in America. And more importantly, the book showed us how much power and strength immigrants have to grow out of it and establish new life in this unfamiliar land. Following the story of a child who was erased in her new country, I read a book about a guy who was erased in his own country. The book is called First They Erased Our Name, A Rohingya Speaks by Habib Rahman with Sophie Enzel and translated by Andrea Rees. I read this book for the month of Burma for the From and About Asia reading project. I'll link all the details down below. 3 years after the author was born in 1982, his ethnicity was excluded from the official 135 recognized ethnic groups in Burma, made him and his family statusless in their own country. They are discriminated against because of their look, their ethnicity, and their religions. They are not allowed to leave their village. They're not even allowed to climb the mountain behind the village, not to mention to get an education or travel for work to make a living. More than 30 years later, in 2016 and 2017, which is only 5-6 years ago, ethnic cleansing was reinforced again in Burma, and as a result, 300,000 of Rohingyas was forced to flee the country. This memoir follows the author's story from his childhood to when he is an adult and he had to separate from his family just because he wanted an education. We see so many things and rights was taken away from the family and so many things the author had to stop pursuing because of their situation. It's horrifying to learn that people's identity can be just erased from their own country just because the prejudice that the authorities has, and also how the privileged community just played along and become the accomplices in some way. I think this book is another must read because of the subject matter and also the fact that I don't think many people are talking or know about this. And yeah, it is another must read in this pile. Lastly, I have the most thought-provoking books of the year, and it is also one of the shorter books in this pile. So it's amazing that how such a short book can make me think so much. And it is a novel called Hotel Silence by Adul Alva Ulfsdotter, translated by Brian Fitzgibbon. I have so many thoughts about this novel, so I have a full review of it, linked down below. This is about a man whose life just got shattered and everybody around him left him in some way. So he was hopeless, so he decided to travel to a war zone and end his life. Upon arriving the hotel, he booked in the war zone, which is of course called Hotel Silence. He met some people who survived the war, or some people also came here because of the war, and their life started to get some unexpected crossover. This is a very depressing book on the surface, but actually a very tender and uplifting one at its core. I liked how gentle the book dealt with depression and other mental health topics, but also I loved how the book had a very deep discussion about war and how war impacts people's lives. The book is also written in a very interesting format, cooperating a lot of interesting quotes from poems and essays on the same topic to present the feelings and the discussions around it. So I think overall it's a very lovely read and I just can't stop thinking about it after I read it. And that's all my favorite books of the year. Overall, I feel very happy about how the year turned out rating-wise, considering that I took many breaks in between. I hope you enjoyed this video and let me know what are your favorite books of the year. And don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Thumbs up to this video if you liked it. Stay healthy, happy reading, happy new year, and I will see you in my next bookish video. Bye!